What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and today we're going to be breaking down the biggest pot I've played in my entire life. It was very early on in the stream at Hustler Casino Live, the $1 Million Cash game, and it was a very large pot versus Tom Dwan, where I got a little spicy there with the suited connectors. So let's go ahead and jump into the action. Before we do, I just want to let you guys know that I am going to have to make YouTube videos now for 22 years to recoup the $1.2 million that I lost in the game yesterday. So if you could go ahead and just spare me a subscribe, show a little support for the next 2,800 videos I'm going to have to make in order to break even on this, I would appreciate it. I'll see you every day for the next 20 years. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the action. So in this hand, we are 501k with a 2k ante, and there's an element to this hand pre-flop that we kind of have to get into, which is I decide to let Wesley sweat my hand, and he makes a remark when I show him my cards. So let's just go ahead and play the pre-flop in this hand real quick.
300 big blinds with some shit, and then 2 hands later you get top full versus strips.
I like this one.
Okay, coming.
I mean, I like everything.
I hope you're balanced with your responses to my cards.
Yeah, I'm very balanced. I like 2 cards.
You like start telling a story?
I did 2 cards.
You know, I played a big pot with that one once.
14.
How much did you like his hand? Was it
Doug Polk opening the suited connector?
So Wesley says I like this one, and you know, we joke back and forth a little bit with it. There's some thoughts on basically what would he say I like this one with, and there's a couple of different schools of thought, right? The first school of thought is when you start someone's hand, you obviously don't want to give away any tells in their hand, so you're just going to say kind of the same thing no matter what. Either you pre-plan you're going to say what you're going to say, or you just have a go-to line that you say, or you know, or you say nothing. But basically, the first school of thought is that you're always balanced, so you can't get a tell off that. The second school of thought is that people will look at your cards and then make remarks based on what you have. So if the second, I don't know Wesley very well, but if the second thing is true, it's obviously a pretty bad situation for someone to be giving off tells about your hand. But I do think at this level, I don't think that people tend to do that all that much. Like I do think that if Wesley looked down at my cards and it was aces, he would say the same thing, or kings, or sevens, or you know, or whatever. Basically, like any kind of good hand, or ace king. I think he would say that no matter what. That said, it's totally possible that that's not the case. But it's definitely something to be thinking about at home. If you ever sweat a hand, either don't say anything or make sure that you're very balanced in what you do say, because you can give stuff away. But what certainly will happen in this hand is Tom is going to hear that and really dissect that, which becomes relevant a little bit later in the hand. Okay, I open up 5-4 of spades, a 3K, and the cutoff.
I did 2 cards.
Tom now looks down at pocket sevens in small blind. He decides to go ahead and make it a re-raise here. Bumps it up to $14,000 to go. Rob gets out of the way with a jack-9. Back over me with 5-4 spades. Kind of a classic poker hand spot. Everything's on the table here. We are very deep, and suited connectors are nice hands to find a position. Typically speaking, they're going to end up being a lot of your bluff hands in some spots where you can credibly represent some value bets. So definitely can call. You also, you know, do want to occasionally 4-bet some suited connectors. This one's probably a little bit too weak to 4-bet all that often. And then it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world to fold this pre-flop some of the time, but you know, you want to get invited back to some live streams? No, I think you should probably be calling. Anyway, so we go ahead and we decide to call.
How much did you like his hand?
And we take a flop.
Was it
Before we take a flop, though, Tom does ask him how much did you like his hand. So you can see that there's already a bit of a dynamic developing here, which is Tom is trying to pick up on what Wesley thinks, or what Wesley's reaction to my cards was.
Tom Dwan puts in the 3-bet from the small blind and flops middle set.
So the flop comes king 7 deuce here. 31K in the pot.
In the middle.
Huge flop for Tom. He flops middle set. I flop just backdoor draws, more or less. Really just less, or exactly. And now he decides to bet 15K and 31K. I think this is really close on the flop. So if you guys watch me play poker, when I'm shuffling my chips, I'm always randomizing in my head. So like I'll look at my chips to decide what I think I should do. And when spots are close, then I'll just mix between multiple actions. I think you could maybe just argue for a pure fold. I'm actually not totally sure what you're supposed to do with 5-4 spades on this flop. I'm not really familiar with a lot of ring formats. This was also especially weird. You got ante, you got a lot of different stuff kind of happening in this one. I don't think it can be that bad to call this bet, given that we do have a lot of playable turns. I mean, if I get a 3, I get a 6. Either one of those, I have an open ender. Obviously, I have a spade, I have a flush draw. Diamond comes in, I can pretty credibly rep the flush. Um, and of course I could also pair on a 5 or a 4. And then I'm not super thrilled at an ace or an 8, but I pick up a gutter on those cards as well. So, a lot of the deck really does improve me here. Anything between a 3 and a 8 that doesn't pair the board, a spade or an ace, really all cards that improve me. And of course I can always take it away in the later street. So definitely close on the flop, but I think I do lean towards a call. Anyway, so I decided to call. I forget if I randomized some folds or not on this flop. I would say I probably didn't, but when versus the 15K size, could definitely argue to throw some folds in. I also will say I don't love Tom's flop size. I think this is a board where you typically want to use a small size and bet pretty high frequency. It's not a huge deal. Like you could bet 11K, you can bet 15K, but I do think that most good players would probably be betting a slightly smaller size. Anyway, we do decide to call, and we take a turn. Turn comes an offsuit 6. We got 61K in the middle, and Tom now decides to bet about half pot. Again, this is not really a size that I think that I like that much. I think typically speaking, once you've bet the flop, you typically want to be doing a decent chunk of checking on the turn, and when you do bet, you kind of want to go for more of a 2/3 to full pot size. That said, I don't think half pot can be bad or anything like that. I just think typically speaking, you're going to want to use larger sizes on these brick turns after you bet flop. Because now if Tom has a hand like queens, he doesn't really want to bet. If he has a hand like maybe even a weak king, he doesn't really super want to bet. So he kind of has a decent king or better. And those hands like to do a big size. And then if he is bluffing with some kind of draw, you obviously want to maximize your fold equity there as well. And kind of pair that with your strong hands. So, and also it just kind of mathematically speaking tends to be a little bit stronger. Anyway, he does bet half pot. So now over to me. Weird spot now with 5-4 spades. I could be totally wrong here, and I'm interested to see if maybe some nerds run this for me because I'm out on the road on my laptop and I don't really have folding ranges and stuff anyway. But I think that this hand has a lot of nice properties for a bluff. So basically, my thinking is that when I have the 5-4 here, like when I think what kinds of hands can Tom be bluffing the turn with, I think it's hands like diamonds, 9-8 suited, 10-8 suited, 10-9 suited, possibly hands like ace queen ace jack. Um, does he have a hand like 5-4 suited himself? It's definitely not impossible, but it's pretty unlikely to bring those out of the small blind very often. So I kind of unblock all of the bluffs, and now I have some really good equity. And then to also kind of to pair that together, my hand, I don't really want to raise flush draws quite as much because I don't want to get put in a spot where I raise a flush draw and then get re-raised afterwards, right? If I raise this hand, he re-raises, it's obviously bad for me, but it's a lot less bad than if I raise with a hand like, let's just say, Queen 10 of diamonds or 10-8 of diamonds or something more like in that vicinity. Anyway, so he bets. I did decide to randomize this turn and raise sometimes and call sometimes. I forget if I did like a close to an even split or if I did a little bit more call. I can't recall, to be honest with you. It was such a long session. It's been so little sleep, but I did decide to do a good chunk of calling and do a good chunk of raising. And I landed on raise, and I decided to make it 115,000 to go. You could argue this is maybe a little bit small. I think though it's a little weird versus the half pot size. I wanted to be able to have a size where I could clearly raise any two pairs, and then my variety of draws or combo draws, or maybe even like 6+ diamonds I could be mixing in there too. But I usually try to go for about 2/3 pot raise, unless I think it's a spot where I need to be raising big to jam river. I don't think this is one of those spots, but it's possible that it is. Either way, the small size is something, or the 2/3 pot size is something that really can't be that bad in general, I don't think. Back over to Tom, once I raise. This is where things kind of go off the rails a little bit, and Tom takes a very long time, in my opinion, before deciding what he wants to do. And, at about 2 minutes and 30 seconds into him tanking, I say, come on, let's move this along. And then at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds, 3 minutes, 30 seconds, I call the clock. So a lot that goes into that. You know, obviously I know we're playing for a good amount of money here, but there is a show going where a lot of people are watching, and I want us to be able to try and get a lot of good hands in here. But also you got to look at kind of like the bet for the stakes of the game, right? Because you could say, oh, it's 110K, you should be able to take it as much time as you want. Well, you know, at some point, obviously that's not true, right? Like let's say we were playing 5K, 10K, and someone three bet. Could you tank for 3 minutes to three bet? Obviously not, right? So in my opinion, this was a little long, and we debated after the hand kind of how long it was exactly. But in my opinion, this was a slightly long tank, and I had a couple hands in the last year playing a lot of live poker where people tanked for a while, and I kind of just decided at some point that after a couple minutes on before the river, if they tank, I'm gonna just say like let's move this along, or you know can we you know not to call the clock, but just kind of say like hey let's move this hand forward. And so I decided to do that here. Some people thought that was a dick move. I really wasn't trying to be a dick. I was just trying to be aware of the fact this was just a turn bet and raise, and we obviously have $1 million in play and a lot of people watching the show.
All right, come on, man. Let's move it along a little bit here.
Can I laugh? Can I laugh?
Can you laugh?
Yeah.
You just did.
I mean, is that okay for you? It's a little weird. He saw your hand. He raises his turn. There's like a little bit to think about.
Tom Dwan was the first hot shot
No, I didn't say his hand. I said this whole process.
coming from the internet to the live poker world.
Doug is having a lot of regrets right now.
You know, Wesley, this might be the last sweat you get to go on today. It's like, oh, time to tell stories.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't even know if you guys know each other. It's 1,000 big blinds deep. You're raising the
I think
turn.
that doesn't matter for. I don't think that matters.
I don't think that much.
All right, we got to move this.
Then Doug came along
I think.
about 4 or 5 years later. Same path.
Just go clock.
Is that okay? I don't want to be a dick, but is clock reasonable here?
Yeah, I call clock on Jeremy.
Wave.
All right, I'll call the clock.
What do they do called clock during this week?
This is kind of a bizarre
How
tank.
long is the clock?
1 minute.
Where's on the way? It happened already this week. I won't worry about being a dick.
Yeah, just whatever you have lunch.
Well, it's weird when you're in the hand because time moves differently, you know?
Sorry for dog and I'm not saying anything anymore. Like, I don't want to. Yeah.
I call.
Interesting. Just a call.
I didn't see a fold after the tape, Danny. Like, that would have put me on tilt.
Tom eventually thinks it over and ultimately does call. As for the strategy part here for Tom, with pocket sevens, you could definitely argue for either 3-bet or call. I don't mind either of them because Tom has sevens. He blocks one of the 7-6 suited combos, makes it a little bit less likely. Obviously, I don't have sevens because he has sevens. I don't really hate either option. And I think a good rule of thumb here is if you're ever in a really deep stack cash game and you get to a point where you're not totally sure what to do, I do think that it's a good idea to call with, you know, you get a weird raise spot, you can just call with your continue range. And yes, you're probably supposed to have some bet 3-bets, but then you know you're uncapped when they do call, so you can have strong hands if your opponent fires later streets. So all in all, I do like the decision to call here with sevens, but I would not fault a bet 3-bet. It's really hard to pick your bluff side if you decide to go for that. Either way, certainly a fine decision to make, and Tom does call, and let's take it over. And the river rolls off. It is not the card I like to see. It is a 6 pairing the board. So I have 5 high now, and once again, I'm going to have to either choose to bluff or give it up. Tom checks it over to me.
How much, Doug?
I think in this spot, a couple things to think about. So for starters, this is just a good concept on paired boards that I think people kind of need to be aware of. What a lot of people do when the board pairs is they just don't bluff because they think, oh, board paired, it's scary, people can have boats and stuff. And certainly that line of thinking would have been nice for me to take here given that he has a full house. But you have to remember that even on board pairing cards, it's a little scarier to bluff, I think, in general. But you still will have hands that want to value bet here. Like, for example, if I had pocket sevens or pocket twos that still put in the flop, I'm going to want to be able to bet here. If I have pocket sixes, I turn to 6. I'm going to want to be able to I'm going to want to, well, let me rephrase this. Basically, I have all of these value bets that want to bet regardless of the fact the board paired, right? Like sixes, like sevens, like deuces, like 7-6 suited. Maybe king 6 suited every now and then, but that'd be a kind of loose preflop call. So I'm definitely going to have a good chunk of hands I want to go for some value. And so you do need to sometimes bluff. And so the question becomes, what are our best bluff candidates? I think in this spot, you really want to avoid having a diamond in your hand because I want Tom to be bet calling the turn with some kind of flush draw. I also think you don't want to have an 8 or a 9. I just think I'm not saying it's super likely, but once you get really deep, people will sometimes just call with a 9-8 here, knowing that if they hit a straight and their opponent has a set or 2 pair, they get the check raise all in and have some really good hands in some unlikely situations. So I think you don't want an 8, you don't want an 8, you don't want a 9, you don't want a diamond. Past that, I think you kind of don't want to have middling-ish cards just because you make it a little less likely that he has a hand like jacks. Now, if you bet big on the turn, he would never have jacks. If you bet really small on the turn, he could definitely have jacks with half pot. Not totally sure where that leaves us. Maybe that hand just folds turn to the raise anyway. But realistically, I think you want to have the hands that really don't have any interaction with those types of folds that can call turn fold river. So I think for that reason, this hand has just basically the best properties kind of across the board of that. I mean, what do I really reach here that's worse than this hand? And I basically don't block any of those hands I just listed that can be bluffing. I will say, in deep stack poker, a lot of times you will use hands that block the full houses. So you might use a hand like 7-5 of spades here instead of 5-4 of spades, so that it's less likely your opponent has a boat. But I don't think this is a board that I'm that worried about boats. I think in this situation, I'm mainly worried that he just has a king and doesn't believe me. So, if this board was a little bit different, I might look to maybe use the card that blocks those boats a little more often. And certainly that's something I've seen when I looked at some solver analysis. But I do think in this situation, it's going to be totally fine to use your lowest end hands. And I'm sure 5-4 spades goes for a decent chunk of the time. I decided to just always go for it here on the river. I'm sure the solver will mix some stuff in, but the solver also will use some bluffs I'll never have. So typically speaking, when I have a combo that I'm like, oh, this is around the bottom of my range, I don't think that removal is the most important thing ever, I'll just always go for it, and then I just won't go for it with some of the middling combos that the solver will use occasionally. Okay, so I go ahead and I bet $420,000. So my thoughts on this river size: if I bet this river, I am saying I have trips or better, 6x of diamonds that raise the turn, or a boat. That range does not like a small bet. That range likes a big, manly bet because they're all very good hands, and I don't really have any thin value bets. I'm not raising king, queen on the turn, so I either have trips or boat, and if I have those hands, I want to go big. Also, a lot of Tom's value bets or a lot of times good hands are going to be hands like ace, king, king, queen, or aces. So those hands you really want to put in a spot where they're very unhappy, and you get to basically bluff more using that size, and you get to try and really win a big pot when you have those value bets. So I think this is that part of this hand I feel very good about. Like I think 420k is likely a very strong size here, and makes perfect sense. And I know the combo of it's a paired board and you're going massive feels a little bit scary, but basically you think, what am I representing, and what do I need? How often do I need to bluff? And I just think this hand is gonna get in there. I'm not gonna have 5-4 hearts or something, right? I don't really have the diamonds or the spades. The spades are definitely better than the diamonds, and I can't have anything lower than this. So this, you could argue that this is probably my #1 best combo to bluff. Maybe 5-4 diamonds could be. Oh, yeah. Let's not get into that realm. Okay. So anyway, so back over to Tom. And this was really confusing to me. I think so. Once bets start to get really big compared to the stakes, I think that it's definitely fine to take 3-5 minutes on a decision for sure. Maybe longer if it's a really sick spot. So I definitely get taking some time here. And I also will note there's a bit of a different dynamic. Like when I played Tom, obviously we've both been playing high stakes for a very long time, and we've both made our careers through poker. So it's a little bit different than if I'm playing versus some of the other guys. But regardless, I do think that it's a situation that's quite reasonable to tank for a bit, but I really thought he had like a king, or maybe was just getting stubborn with something like jacks, and eventually Tom does make the call.
And if you see quads, you see quads. Durr. What are we doing?
You win. I know I win, probably. Question was just if I'm shoving or not, dude.
What the fuck?
It's if I shove the river or not. I'm never folding. It's if I shove the river or not. Do I shove or not?
Of course you should.
No, it's pretty close.
Of course you should.
It's definitely
Pretty
close.
close.
And I think it's not a shove.
I'm going to take a break after that one.
What happened pre-flop?
Open card re-raise.
You're a good actor.
I'm deciding do I shove or not.
No, I know.
Well, luckily I'm not worried that you gave anything away anymore.
I think he called because of Wesley.
Yeah, because of me. Yeah, maybe I thought his.
I saw that you have a diamond 8-9.
Now we know Tom hates dog.
Looking at the live read portion of this, Tom was very interested in what Wesley said pre-flop and really trying to break that down. And Wesley was also completely in shell shock mode. He was just over there hiding, trying to not to basically just be like, I don't want to influence this. I'm just going to hide. I'm going to look at the table. This is a move we're going to see later in one of the future videos that I make on this session. But he didn't want to influence the action. I don't know, is that weak or strong? It looks kind of weak to me, but I guess it's up to whatever people think. But this is why if you're going to sweat hands, guys, you got to be balanced. And the call was a little weird to me. I get that you need to be ahead of the value, but he kept saying I could have kings. I don't really know how often I have kings. I think I'm almost always 4-betting kings. Maybe once in a blue moon I show up with kings, but I think it's pretty unlikely. And then of the sevens, or sorry, of the other hands, like I can have sevens, or I can have deuces that trapped. I can I can only have 7-6 suited because that hand's blocked. So I can have king 6 suited, deuces, or sixes. So, maybe if he thinks that kings is in there, he's just not doing that hot against that range. But I think realistically, the only hand that I'm going to be beating him here with is pocket sixes. I do think it's a little more likely that I have a hand like deuces that trap flop or king 6 of clubs. I'm talking myself out of raising now. I think maybe the call is fine from Tom. Either way, I was very surprised to see it. And when he called, I said, "You win." He said, "No, I win." I was like, "What?" And he showed sevens. I was a little bit surprised to see that. So anyway, huge pot, $1.1 million. The biggest pot I played in my life, actually. Did I play a bigger one later? No, I think this is the biggest pot I played in my life. That's kind of crazy. But it goes Tom Dwan's way, and I am stuck 500 and something K right out of the gate. Originally, I was going to break down several hands in one video, but given how long this went, I'm going to actually chop them up into several different videos. We're going to be going through the biggest pots I thought were interesting in a row. I'll have 4 or 5 videos coming out over the next few days, so stay tuned. Hit that subscribe button. We'll talk about the biggest pot ever in a bit, or one of them, or whatever it ended up being. But we're going to talk about all the craziest hands. Hit that subscribe button and join the team, guys. I'll see you back again soon because I need the revenue.